What do you do when a powerful nation gives you just weeks to move out of your home so that they can destroy it? That's exactly what's happening in Palestine. Israeli authorities ordered the residents of a Bedouin village in the occupied West Bank to vacate their properties as part of the Tel Aviv regime's continuing policy of settling its people in the occupied lands, even though there is international condemnation over this move.
Officials from the so-called Israeli Civil Administration Higher Planning Council distributed evacuation notices among the residents of al-Ahmar village, ordering them to evacuate their homes before a specific deadline. A statement from the unit of Israeli Ministry of Military Affairs claimed a Supreme Court ruling allowed them to demolish the village. Sources claim Israeli forces also threatened the residents, in the sense that the Israeli army would do this even if the villagers didn't leave. Adding to the tension, it is alleged that during the searches, Israeli soldiers touched women inappropriately and demanded that they strip. They are also accused of stealing money from women and men at a checkpoint, which is one of the main crossings into the West Bank. Palestinians frequently complain of being brutalized, forced through cattle pens, and interrogated while crossing through the checkpoint on their way to work or school.
If Israel does want peace with Palestine, why has there been so much killing? And how much respect has Israel shown for the United Nations, which has called for the end of these settlement activities? Simple questions with important answers. What can be done to stop Israel's settlement extensions on Palestinian land? And is the public aware of the extension of illegal Israeli settlements in the occupied territories? We asked them. Here's what they said.
If it's an area of land that is recognised as being Palestinian, then I think you're just adding fuel to the fire to build on it and to reside there.
It's a complicated situation and I'm learning things all the time, but that particularly I wasn't aware about, though.
No, I don't have much idea on this.
What they've done from 1948 up until today, if you look at the percentage takeover from what it was, what had been agreed on by the UK and what it is right now, you'd see all the legal settlements that shouldn't be there today.
I think the West's role in it is interesting. I'm skeptical as to whether what we say, how much what we say matters. I think, like Ahmad said, ultimately any solution has got to come from the Israelis and the Palestinians. The US and the West set the narrative, but they can't. The solution has got to come from them, ultimately.
Not much, because I tend not to think about things I have no sort of control or power about.
I definitely feel that the Palestinians in this kind of act are being deprived from their rights and are being kicked out just for the sake of expanding other illegal settlements.
Yes, I know about it, and I think it's atrocious that no one's doing enough about it.
I do. I think that it's atrocious. I think it's completely unacceptable. I think that international law should take a stronger standpoint in relation to these settlements and put a stop to them.
I think it's wrong. It's like the Western government's choosing to follow one religious identity over another, and it has no place in modern democracy.
al-Ahmar is the latest Palestinian village to be demolished. A demolition order has been sent to the Palestinians, and on Monday Israeli bulldozers will be going to the town, which is deep within the West Bank. But this one, if Israelis build another settlement in al-Ahmar, what that would do is completely cut off East Jerusalem from the rest of the West Bank. The international community, the UN, the European Union, not to mention the Palestinian Authority, they've all come out and denounced this move. And I think, if anything, this shows that Israel has never been interested in a peaceful resolution to the Palestinian issue. If it did, it would not be annexing land that was meant for peace to further its colonial enterprise. So it would never be doing that if that was its true intention, to have a peaceful resolution to the Palestinian conflict. And this is a further confirmation that it doesn't want a peaceful resolution.
Yes, of course. This year alone, the Israeli Prime Minister, after Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, the government of Israel has felt very encouraged and empowered to break international law even more than it did before. So they announced the building of 6,000 more housing units and are going to press ahead with that, in addition to permission being given for settlements to be set up on private Palestinian land. So, yes, I knew about it, but the problem, you know, with the settlements is not so much the houses themselves, it's the land that they take around them, which is good farming land, that the Palestinians lose to the settlements. So that's the problem.
Israeli forces have warned residents that they would advance their plans to demolish Khan al-Ahmar, even if the villagers don't listen to the notices and leave. What are the public's thoughts?
I don't agree with that again. If it's Palestinian, or if it's recognised as being an area for Palestinians to reside, then I don't agree with demolishing.
It happens all over the world. It happened in Russia with the Olympics. They said you have to get out because we have to build a road. That's horrendous, I think.
That's against the humanity actually. Whatever we have, the religions, that's the different story. But as per humanity factor, you can say whether in the world we have different religion, but we have to respect all kind of humanity.
I mean, you say it as if it's a new thing. It's been happening for multiple years. When I say multiple, actually decades. What do I think about that? Again, the same response. I think it's disgusting.
I would say it's modern day imperialism.
Why do you feel that way?
Because it resembles the imperialism of the European powers in the 19th century.
I think it's sad that humans talk to one another in that way. Tragic.
I think that's not the first. That happened before, and what I can say is that we need to sort of advocate for all the NGOs and for the international community to step up and do something to try to avoid this catastrophe, because in my case, yeah, that could develop to become a catastrophic event.
It's the same with settlements. It's just like, it's just not like whatever is happening. It's just like, it's beyond words anymore. I think it's just we're past that.
I mean, this is something that has been happening, you know, for quite a long time. I think it goes against every kind of conception of human rights, whether it's recognized human rights or even human rights between people and nations, between neighbors, and it stands completely against all of that.
It's just fascism.
The thoughts are with the families, of course. You know, there are women, there are children as well. Altogether, around 200 Palestinians who have been living there for decades, and their livelihood has been destroyed for no other reason other than the fact that they are the wrong ethnicity as far as Israel is concerned. So their homes will be demolished to make way for Jewish-only settlements. What that means is not even Arabs who are citizens of Israel will be allowed to live and buy houses in those settlements. It's Jewish-only settlements. That is a clear definition of racism, and this is something which everyone needs to recognize and stand up against. And Palestinians, these are just 200 of thousands of Palestinians who have had to flee and make way for a racist enterprise, which is the expansion of Israeli settlements within occupied Palestine.
Well, you see, the house demolition policy of Israel, successive Israeli governments, is absolutely iniquitous. The international community has never attempted to punish Israel for the things that it does. House demolitions have a particular, they cause particular anger, because the idea of losing your own home, of actually being thrown out onto the street, is so awful. I find it extraordinary that the world has stood by and let Israel do it. Now, of course, Israel doesn't only demolish houses, it demolishes towns, villages. And the village of Khan al-Ahmar, which is a pathetic Bedouin collection of houses that should have been left alone, is under enormous threat. And of course, it's part of the same awful policy that Israel practices.
Israel claims it wants peace, but it has killed over 185 and injured more than 20,000 Palestinians since March 2018 and continues to destroy their homes. How does the public regard what many call hypocrisy, and why is Israel claiming it wants peace?
I would say that you wouldn't want to admit to the wrongdoing if you want to be considered as the person who's actually making steps towards doing what's right.
We can't really argue with that, really. If that's happening, then that needs to stop, really. But I would argue that they might say that it's part of a process towards peace and not, not an easy thing.
They want peace. That is not acceptable when you are damaging the human, damaging the lives.
My personal opinion, and I do hope that I'm wrong, no. But do I want change? Of course.
I mean, it's all very well to say you want peace, but what kind of peace solution do you want, right? If they want peace, but the peace they want is something that the Palestinians are never going to accept, then that's not really saying you want peace.
Self-interest, actually. I think that people, their agenda isn't the greater good. They're looking at their own advancement.
Peace can never be obtained if evictions and violence exists. So we need to sort of maintain and preserve human rights, at least for the Palestinians.
It's words for the record. They use them in order to promote stuff, but then they have no meaning.
I think Israel should come up with a better definition of what it means as peace.
Well, they're liars. They've got a ethno-nationalistic agenda, and it's got to be stopped.
Israel has always made claims that it wants peace, but it's always been peace in its own terms, not terms which conforms to any sense of equality, fairness and justice, not to mention international law. So in practicality, what that means is that Israel wants a resolution and peace which does not recognize Palestinian sovereignty, which does not recognize Palestinian rights, which basically throws out the rights of 5-6 million Palestinian refugees and deny Palestinian access and rights to what has historically been their capital city, which is East Jerusalem. So yes, it wants peace, but peace under its own terms, not terms which the international community has agreed upon, which international law has declared. These are the boundaries and parameters of peace. But Israel wants peace in its own terms, and not terms dictated by anyone else, terms which are dictated by only a settler colonial enterprise.
Well, Israel has maintained an attitude, totally false, of course, that the Jewish state was always ready to make peace with its neighbors, including the Palestinians. What it's done is it talks like this and meanwhile makes war, grabs territory, steals land. So it's surreal that a state which behaves like this can go around with this rhetoric, which is all that it is. And it's particularly sickening at this time with Gaza, not only under the worst humanitarian disaster that can be imagined because of the siege, but on top of that, losing so many of its innocent, defenseless people. The idea that at a moment like this, Israel has the insolence to talk about peace, surely that can fool no one.
Israel says it wants peace with Palestine, but 15 settler units will be built in the Sheikh Jarrah neighbourhood, while 75 others will be constructed in Beit Hanina neighbourhood. Another 220 units will be built in the Yeshiva Neve Zion district. And remember those casualty figures. Since March 2018, at least 185 Palestinians have been killed and over 20,000 injured. It is estimated there are about 7 million Palestinian refugees worldwide, meaning 1 in 3 refugees on Earth is Palestinian.
Just before Donald Trump took office as president, the United Nations Security Council adopted Resolution 2334, calling on Israel to immediately and completely cease all settlement activities in the occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem. What does the public think of this demand?
If you are saying that you want to take steps to go for peace or to discuss it and to try and have some agreement, then why would you agitate the situation by building in a land where Palestinians feel it's theirs? I just don't agree with.
If you've got to find places for people to live, then that's one thing. But I don't know, really. I don't really have an answer to that, to be honest.
I think here all the United Nations members should become active on this, and every country should protect what the Israelis are doing, and everybody come to in a single place and discuss for their peace settlement, not that kind of activities.
If Trump were to hold a flag and say, you know, I don't want to be a part of the UN, which he did not too long ago, actually, yesterday, then I think being backed by a country like that, they have the power, or think they have the power to do so as well. And not just them, actually. I think they have quite a lot of support from the Middle East itself, companies from the GCC, which unfortunately are supporting them in many ways.
I think the recent turn of the US's sort of position on this front has had a dramatic change on the ability that, on the kind of their ability to say sod the UN, basically.
Because they knew that with Trump's support, they could go ahead. America's a powerful country, and Trump's made it clear where his allegiance lies. He's not neutral or even in any way objective on the cause.
What I can say, what is pretty clear for everyone who's actually watching politics, is that you can tell sort of the US foreign policy is more leaning towards Israel against the Palestinians. And yes, and that's really, that's something sad to see.
Because no one is stopping them.
I think resolutions are a mechanism to try to gauge what public opinion is. They're actually not things that are followed. They're rarely ever applied when the need be. So I don't really take reservations very seriously.
They know they can get away with it. And Trump is quite right-wing, they're quite right-wing, so they're good bedfellows.
That's just one of the many dozens of United Nations resolution against the construction of illegal settlements, and for the last 5 decades it's always been the case. There's been United Nations declarations one after another, and it's never been implemented. And now the international community is gathering at the UN right now, and one of the questions is, why is the UN so ineffective? And if you look throughout its history, especially in the last 5 decades, no one's done more to undermine the United Nations and the progressive global order, you can say, which is based upon principles which more or less we can agree upon universally. No one has done more to undermine this and delegitimize the United Nations more than the United States and Israel, especially when it comes to Palestine. So this is something which the international community is asking now, what can we do to make the United Nations more effective and take away this monopoly, which the Security Council has with these permanent members who violate or who veto any resolution which does not agree with their policies.
You see, when that resolution was passed, something very remarkable happened, which is not only that all the members of the Security Council, excluding the United States, voted for it, but the United States, for the first time, abstained. This was amazing in a history in which the US sets out to protect Israel no matter what it does. On this occasion, it decided that that was wrong, that it would at least abstain. Of course, when Trump took office, it was obvious, I think, to anybody who saw the way he was behaving and the people he's surrounded by, it was obvious that he would give the nod to Israel to ignore United Nations resolutions, to ignore international law, and just press on doing what it wants to do. That has been the tone of the Trump presidency, and we're not surprised.
What, if anything, can be done to stop Israel's settlement extensions on Palestinian land? Here's what the public think.
No, I think we'd have to do sanctions, or people would have to say that they don't agree with it. And I think it's difficult because of the history and why Israel is actually there. But the reality is that two wrongs don't make a right. So even though you were wronged, it doesn't give you the right to wrong someone else.
It's not a black and white situation, so I don't really see how it can be easy, but I don't really feel like it can't be done.
Yeah, actually here even need to be more activate, and all the member countries should be protect them, and they always try to support both the countries for their peace, and if required, even should be take more action and sit both countries together and discuss how they will initiate the peace process.
No, I think if there was a solution, it would have to be one that would come from Israel, be supported by from the Palestinian territories, as well as much larger countries like, for example, the US, supported by individuals like Trump. With a force behind them, I think, yes, it is possible.
Any sort of persuasion of Israel, although I completely disagree with what they're doing, it cannot be seen to be telling them off, because they'll just never accept it. And ultimately we can shout as loud as we want from the West, but they're not going to do anything. The sensible approach is the one that Obama had for some years, which is to try and get them to at least engage with the other side, because ultimately they're the people that are going to, if there is going to be a solution, it's going to come from them.
It has to be at that sort of UN level. It has to involve cooperation across the world, and countries to speak out and say, actually, let's try and find some. Let's not let this continue for another 60 years. This isn't an acceptable way of going. Yeah, it's just not acceptable.
I think the international community needs to step up, and the UN Council need to sort of have an action plan to sort of just come for a final solution for once and for all, because I mean the suffering has been going on for over like 70, 60 years. I think it's just enough. The Palestinians need peace.
I mean, I'd say international pressure, but that's so much of that is being done. I think there needs to be pressure specifically on the US to do something about it, because they're the ones who are allowing it to the extent that it's happening now.
I believe in boycott. I believe in BDS. I believe in standing up for what you believe in. I believe in taking all these beliefs and practicing them day in and day out, no matter where you are, and no matter how limited you are in applying these kind of principles for your own self. And I think once it happens on an individual level, states can actually start recognizing it on a state level, and then hopefully the international community.
I think two-state solution, and actually give the Palestinians rights.
Other than civic actions by progressive individuals who want to see peaceful resolution to not just Palestine but in other parts of the world, there isn't really that much that can be done on a state level. It seems with the United Nations, with the European Union, there's a paralysis when it comes to doing anything effective to resolve the Palestinian question. Israel seems to be above the law. And these are not my words, these are the words of an Israeli legal representative last week who said that Israel is above the law. We can build settlements wherever we want. We can violate international sovereignty wherever we want. These are his words, you know. We can violate sovereignty wherever we want, and the idea that Palestinians can tell us that we cannot build settlements in the West Bank is just ludicrous, because we can do whatever we want. These are the words of an Israeli legal representative for the government. So it is above the law, but the international community and individuals need to be more active and take civic action and be more engaged in politics, and realize that the international order that has been constructed to protect the rights of minorities and individuals and uphold justice is being chipped away by the American under Trump and Israel.
This question really relates to what are we going to do with regard to Israel, period. It's not just one particular policy that Israel adopts that we are against or want to oppose. It's the whole of the behavior, the raison d'etre of the state must be called into question. Now that needs concerted international action, and unfortunately, from the way things are going, it doesn't look that's going to happen. Therefore, I believe there is only one way for ordinary people to express their disgust with this state's inhuman criminal behavior and do their own opposition And we know that they're doing it through the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement, which everybody should join.
No one will leave. We will have to be expelled by force. Those are the words of the village spokesman, adding, if the Israeli army comes to demolish, it will only be by force. Israel says Palestinian buildings were put up without the relevant consent, but critics insist building permits are nearly impossible to obtain for Palestinians in Israeli-controlled areas of the West Bank.
Even though the United Nations Security Council has called on Israel to immediately cease all settlement activities, Israel carries on regardless, building hundreds of new settler homes in the occupied old city of Jerusalem al-Quds, despite the international outcry. When it comes to building on occupied territories, it seems that Israel has no intention of being stopped by, let's face it, significant obstacles like human rights or international law.